welcome to the program. I am your host, Andrew Wilkow. It is 8 p.m. here on the East Coast. And earlier today, the From the River to the Sea Death to America crowd basically took over hallways and a commissary in the United States Senate. But it was not an insurrection. And the people that were removed will not be rotting in jail for the next 3 years. Take a look.
People are dying in Gaza. People are dying. Step back. People are dying.
Yeah, if MAGA hat wearing people were doing that, you know it would be morning, noon, and night on CNN and MSNBC. But we are going to be talking about how Biden is hemorrhaging young voters. The polls are not working in Biden's favor, and it seems like the media is starting to freak out about this.
In the 2020 NBC News exit poll, candidate Biden led former President Trump by 24 percentage points among voters under 30. But an NBC survey in January had President Biden up by just 8 percentage points among that group. Another poll last month showed Mr. Trump ahead by 18 points among voters under 30.
Now, I could have played you clip after clip, but we don't have time for that. My first guest is from the American Pulse Research and Polling and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast. Dustin, I didn't have time to play a ton of clips, but there seems to be a general panic in the media, especially on CNN and MSNBC. Do they know something we don't?
Well, you could play a ton of clips. We could also run through a lot of polls. This is something that we're seeing consistently in poll after poll. Last week, the Wall Street Journal poll. There's also been a recent Gallup poll and even a Marquette poll. There's so many different polls. The Rasmussen poll recently, they're all showing the same thing, that young voters in particular are moving away from President Biden. He got around 61% of the young vote back in 2020, and now he's down, depending on which poll you're in, he's either only up by 1 or he's about 50-50. It's really quite something to watch. And actually a Morning Consult poll, they showed that the top issue for that group was the economy, and it's twice as much than it is for older voters. And one thing that is a slight silver lining for the current president is that older voters are slightly eroding for Donald Trump. And I think this really comes down to economic concerns. Younger voters are in a position where it's harder to buy a home, to start a family. Everyday essentials are more expensive, whereas people who are more established, they have their mortgage paid off, they have things maybe worked out, they're a little bit less concerned. So I think that's partly what's going on, as well as other disaffected voters, minorities who might be impacted by the economy more. Really, the economy is driving these numbers, in my opinion.
Now, I know that Democrats are trying to scare people that Trump is just going to get rid of Social Security or something. I haven't seen Trump say anything like that. If we were talking about ending Social Security, it wouldn't be for people who are on it. It would be people who don't pay in and then don't expect to receive from it. But at the same time, Biden is trying to win voters by buying them with student loan forgiveness. But here's the thing. People expect or should expect to pay their student loan back. They don't expect to have gas prices jumping, food prices jumping, the wages they earn buy less across the board, and have their cities overrun by migrants.
Absolutely. So the top issues, so if you look at all the recent polling, really, if you look at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats for the current, for the former president, Donald Trump, I would say the strengths are the economy is a big issue. People trust him on that. Border security is something they trust him on. These are the top two issues. Crime is also starting to inch into one of the top issues, depending on the poll that you look at. Recent Gallup poll had that above 50%. These are all issues that people trust Donald Trump on more. A couple of the areas of weakness that Donald Trump may not be as favored as Joe Biden is actually on abortion. Biden has a slight advantage there. And then with the weakening of the older vote, it's actually on Social Security. In my lifetime, I've never seen a politician more deftly handle the Social Security question than Donald Trump. He has never done anything to put himself into the typical position that a Republican has. Actually, it's not my position. We have to deal with Social Security. But Donald Trump literally is the only candidate I've ever seen who's not said anything that could come back to bite him when it comes to Social Security. So I think this Joe Biden play to try to make that into an issue is actually going to fall fairly flat. Also, with the recent statements on abortion that President Trump has made. I think he's definitely moderating on it. And I don't even know it's moderating. He's taking the position of it's back to the states. This is the intention. Each state can do it. So, this is the number one issue that could affect Republicans. You can't run away from it. Not talking about it is not an option. And you can have a conservative stance with it, but avoiding abortion is not going to work for Republicans.
Yeah, but it's not going to be a function of presidential politics. I mean, Biden can say that he's going to nationalize it, but the Supreme Court will have to overturn that because they just sent it back to the states. But before we run out of time, there seems to be a general freak out in the media, like they're preparing themselves. They're seeing the polls. The promises made based on race or class or religion or sexual orientation are going away. Everyone's affected by this economy, and everyone is now affected by the open border crisis. It's not just the border states. It's gone to every hole and corner of this country. And Biden is changing none of his policies.
Yeah. So when you see something that's unique or interesting in a poll, it's just a one-off. For instance, some of the early polling that showed that the African Americans are moving away from Biden and moving towards Trump. You see that one time, okay, that's not that big of a deal, but you start seeing it in almost every poll. Well, there's something going on there. You see it with the young voters, you see it with Hispanics. Something's going on here. And then you see all the swing states are generally moving towards Trump, or he's winning them. There's something going on here. And for Democrats in the media, I think this is a classic case of cognitive dissonance. The reality that they're being presented through the polling doesn't meet with their Manhattan lifestyle and what they see and what they experience. And there's this cognitive dissonance that shows up, that their reality doesn't match what they're being told by the polling. And I think that's where you get the freak out.
Well, they probably only have themselves to blame. I got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
And speaking of crime, a group of migrants raided a Target on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and then tried to fight the cops. And then 5 illegals were arrested at a migrant shelter for attacking a security guard. Take a look.
New this morning, police have arrested several people after a fight broke out at the Randall's Island migrant shelter. The NYPD says 5 residents were taken into custody and charges are pending. Investigators say a security guard who tried to intervene suffered minor injuries. There have been several violent incidents at this particular shelter this year. Back in January, a migrant was stabbed to death in the shelter cafeteria.
So much for that Manhattan lifestyle, right? My argument's next.